Ukrainian-operated F-16 fighter jets have reportedly carried out precision strikes on Russian military positions near Kondrativka and Guptarivka in Russia's Belgorod region. These strikes mark a significant deepening of Ukraine's air campaign beyond the front lines. Additional airstrikes have also been reported in the village of Huyevo in Russia's Kursk region, further signaling Ukraine's expanding reach and growing use of Western-supplied air power. The scale of damage remains unclear, but the frequency and depth of these attacks are increasing pressure on Russian defenses. A Russian Pantsir-S is destroyed. Successful destruction of a Russian Tu-S-19 Pantsir-S self-propelled howitzer. The Pantsir-S is a 152mm self-propelled howitzer used by Russian forces for long-range artillery support. Mounted on a tracked chassis, it offers mobility and firepower, capable of firing up to 8 rounds per minute. With a range of up to 30 kilometers using standard shells, and farther with rocket-assisted rounds, it plays a key role in Russia's artillery tactics. However, in Ukraine, many Pantsir-S systems have been destroyed by drones and counter-battery fire, exposing their vulnerability on the modern battlefield. More Russian equipment destroyed. Disruption of Russian logistics and communication on the Lyman axis. Battalion Signum carried out precision strikes, destroying 2 trucks, Ural and Kamaz, 2 communication antennas, a Bukhanka van, and a vehicle equipped with an electronic warfare system. The Russian military has not depleted its missile stocks even in the 4th year of the war with Ukraine. The Kremlin currently possesses about 500 missiles and has no plans to halt production. Meanwhile, manufacturers of Patriot air defense missiles are still falling behind the Russians in munitions production, wrote The Economist. For instance, Lockheed Martin, which builds Patriot systems and their accompanying missiles, PASI-3, is increasing its capacity to 650 missiles per year. However, this is approximately 100 fewer than the projected Russian production of ballistic missiles. Simultaneously, according to ISW analysts, Russian leader Vladimir Putin is using long-range strikes on Ukrainian cities, aggressive rhetorical campaigns, and excessive pessimism in the West regarding the battlefield situation in Ukraine to undermine Ukrainians' morale and convince the West that Russia's victory in Ukraine is inevitable and that supporting Ukraine is futile. Conversely, on May 26th, Ukraine continued to target defense production facilities in Russia, where Shahed drones are manufactured. Ukrainian drones attacked the Yelabuga and the Ivanovo regions, hitting a plant that produces components for Russian equipment and weapons, including missiles. The problem is that Ukraine has slipped from being a priority for the Biden administration to just one of only many potential customers competing for limited production under Donald Trump. Lockheed Martin, which builds the Patriot systems and their PAC-3s, is increasing its output to 650 missiles per year. But this is about 100 fewer than projected Russian production of ballistic missiles, with a Ukraine government source estimating the Kremlin has a 500 missile stockpile. It usually takes 2 PAC-3 interceptor missiles to intercept a Russian ballistic missile. Europe's decision, if there is one, to lift the missile range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine is dangerous and is contrary to aspirations of reaching a settlement, Peskov said. The decisions, if indeed there are such decisions, are absolutely contrary to our aspirations to reach a political settlement and to the efforts that are now being made within the framework of the settlement. These are quite dangerous decisions, he said.
Well, this was the beginning of the continuation. And he strikes for Kyiv. How dangerous is this? How dangerous is it for them?
If such
the decisions were indeed on the table. They're absolutely lost. With our circumstances going out, practically nullifying the efforts currently being made within the framework of settlement. So, well, a rather dangerous decision, again, if they will.
Mark Rutte wants to hold a short NATO summit without divisions among members due to Trump and Zelensky. The U.S. may cut support for Ukraine, complicating the situation at the summit. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte wants next month's annual alliance summit to be short. and held in a friendly atmosphere. Ruda hopes to avoid divisions among its members amid the complex relationship between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, reports the New York Times, citing European officials and diplomats. Two factors could spoil the atmosphere during the NATO summit. First, U.S. President Donald Trump, who is expected to attend the summit, has disagreements with allies over the future of Ukraine. Ukraine, for its part, wants to join NATO, which Trump categorically opposes. The NATO summit, scheduled for June 24th to 25th in the Netherlands, will take place at a time when the United States is retreating from its main responsibility for the defense of Europe, creating significant uncertainty about security on the continent. Trump administration officials have warned their European counterparts that serious changes in the rotation of American troops are inevitable, even as they try to reassure allies that the U.S. is committed to NATO. At the same time, Trump is curtailing support for Ukraine, abandoning efforts to broker a ceasefire in the war, and seeking to normalize relations with Russia. Given all this, Ukraine's role at the summit is uncertain, not least because of Trump's disdain for President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is also expected to attend the summit. It is not even known whether Zelensky will be invited to the main dinner to mark the opening of the summit. Officials suggested that there would be no meeting of the Ukraine-NATO Council at this summit, where allies would be on an equal footing with Ukraine, as in previous years. Some noted that after the dinner on the first evening, NATO leaders would meet for only a few hours the next day to ratify new spending targets that could help European allies eventually replace the United States as the main guarantor of the continent's conventional defense. NATO is also planning a parallel defense industry forum, which Zelensky may attend. Under President Joe Biden, Zelensky played an important role in the last two NATO summits. 2 years ago in Lithuania, the summit was unsuccessful when Zelensky and his allies sought firmer commitments on the timing of Ukraine's accession to NATO. Back in 2008, NATO agreed that both Ukraine and Georgia will become members of NATO, but did not specify a date or path to this. Biden and some other leaders did not consider Ukraine ready for membership while it was still at war with Russia and resisted setting any date or process. Last year's version of the communiqué, which NATO releases at the end of each summit, promised continued assistance to Kyiv. But on membership, it simply said that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. Officials said this year's communiqué will be short and concise and is still being drafted. The Institute estimates that Europe will eventually need to spend about $1 trillion to replace U.S. forces and assets stationed in Europe. But experts such as Camille Grand, a former senior NATO official, consider this figure to be inflated and, in any case, roughly what Europeans will spend under new spending targets over the next decade or so. NATO and the European Union, most of whose 27 members are also NATO members, have already done much since Russia's invasion of Ukraine to strengthen deterrence. NATO has become stronger, fairer, and more lethal than it was before the invasion, said the new Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Radmila Shekerinska. But much more needs to be done, she acknowledged, and NATO is working to reach consensus on spending targets before the summit. This is our main goal. This is a huge deal, but it is not yet resolved, she noted. The United States of America calls on the North Atlantic Alliance to develop concrete measures to achieve the target of 5% of output for defense spending. Particular attention should be paid to the development of hard defense capabilities. Anarchists have claimed responsibility for a series of large-scale sabotage attacks on power grid facilities in France, targeting the defense industry. They disclosed their motives in a statement published online. On the evening of May 24th, a fire broke out at a high-voltage substation in Tanneron, France, resulting in a power outage affecting 160,000 homes in the Alpes-Maritime department, including Cannes and Nice. The following morning, on May 25th, 3 of the 4 supports of a 225 kilovolt power line in Villeneuve-Loubet were damaged. Unknown perpetrators sawed through the structural supports, causing another large-scale power outage. Officially, no direct connection between the incidents has been established yet. However, responsibility for the damage to the power grid was claimed by a group identifying themselves as 2 groups of anarchists and a libertarian commando, who published a manifesto on the web platform Indomedia. According to the authors of the statement, the main goal of the action was to disrupt the Cannes Film Festival award ceremony and target companies such as Thales Alenia Space and dozens of its subcontractors in the region due to their military involvement. Enough! Your nauseating speeches trying to drag us into your war preparations, read one of the slogans from the manifesto. Located in Cannes, the Thales Alenia Space Facility is a leading European enterprise specializing in the manufacturing and integrating satellite and space systems. Its core activities encompass both civilian and defense projects. The company produces satellites, communication systems, and control systems used in the following space programs: Spacebus, a series of geostationary telecommunication satellites built on the Spacebus platform; Sentinel-1C, radar observation satellites for the Copernicus program, utilized for Earth monitoring; CSO, a series of French military high-resolution optical reconnaissance satellites; Syracuse-4, a series of military communication satellites for the French armed forces featuring secure and encrypted data transmission channels. It is worth noting that this is not the first sabotage of such scale targeting France's energy network in recent years. In April 2024, hackers attacked the Coulandin hydroelectric power plant, an incident that French intelligence attributes to Russian special services. This month, French intelligence agencies released a joint 16-page report titled Russian Threats and Actions Against France, which revealed several episodes of cyber attacks, espionage, sabotage, and attempts by Russia to influence the country's political processes. In addition to the previously mentioned attack on the hydroelectric plant, the report also covered espionage activities targeting scientific institutions involved in defense technologies, including laser systems. In 2023, attackers targeted the company KNDS France, formerly Nexter, a manufacturer of Caesar howitzers. Official correspondence related to the supply of this equipment to Ukraine was stolen.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week at 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.